think that overall the economic data is mixed, but we got a couple of good data points in the last month. So inflation did decrease from 9.1 to 8.5%. Inflation was until now measured on a year-over-year basis, not a month-over-month basis. But since we got the first good month-over-month reading, all of a sudden now it's been redefined to be on a month-over-month basis. Just this is the same thing that happened with the definition of recession, where recession used to mean 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. Of course, that happened. And so all of a sudden the definition became unknowable. We have to defer to this economic board that won't render a decision until next year. By the way, if that were true, how could we ever contemporaneously talk about a recession? You know, if you had to wait until this economics board declares a recession a year from now, the press could never have ever reported
I, for one,
on a
am
recession.
Shocked. Yeah, I'm shocked. Politicians
so look,
are
the
spinning.
politics of this are obvious,
Yeah.
which is they keep redefining terms rather than admit that there's any bad data at all.
That's mixed.
Now, look, I don't think the data is catastrophic. I don't think it's in anyone's interest to catastrophize the data, but there's a lot of negative data out here. I mean, look, inflation is still very high, 8.5%. If you had told any of us that in August that inflation would still be 8.5% at the beginning of this year, we would have said that is horrible. Because remember, the investment banks were all saying it's going to come down to 3% by the end of the year. So inflation is still high. The jobs picture is good. We're technically in a recession. If I were to predict, I think what's going to happen now, I think, look for a double dip. I wouldn't be surprised at all if in Q3 or Q4, we're back to positive GDP growth. But I don't think we're necessarily out of the woods, because I think there's a pretty good chance that next year, these rate hikes really kick in. It takes 6 to 9 months for them to ripple through the economy. So if you look at the construction industry has just been devastated. New housing starts, you talk to the builders, they tell you that the construction industry has just been clobbered by these rate hikes. The inventories are piling up, and the affordability there's a chart today about the affordability of home prices at a 40-year low. And so the construction industry is really the bellwether. When a recession starts, they're the ones who are first impacted, but it's probably going to take 6 to 9 months.
Because the loans are so expensive and cost of capital is expensive.
Right.
They can't start new projects. Yeah.
So look, I think we're in a shallow technical recession right now. I bet that we probably bounce out of it in Q3 or Q4, but I think there's a significant risk that we're back in it next year. Just my guess.
Freeberg, we've been talking about consumer credit a whole bunch. Buy now, pay later. Household debt now totals more than 16 trillion. Credit card balances make up 890 billion of that. Obviously, student loans, mortgages, other things are in there. And the number of credit cards is now at a massive high, 550 million of them issued here in the United States. We added a massive amount of debt. It's still lower. The credit card debt, just to be clear, is still lower than the pre-pandemic level of 930 billion. But consumers seem to be taking out credit, I guess, to deal with inflation or to enjoy their lives, because they're not stopping their spending. And we see that in some of the stocks and the earnings reports that are coming out as well. So what's your take on this, conflicting data we have, or have you made some sense of it? And what is your prediction of Q4?
Sorry, are you asking what my take is on the consumer credit?
Well, basically the overall macro situation here. We've got consumer credit, people taking on a lot of debt while jobs look great, while inflation is still high. What does that look like, as we go into Q4 and next year? What is this telling you? Is there some signaling you can take from this? Sachs said shallow recession, thinks we might double dip. I'm kind of getting to your prediction of Q4. Maybe
this is a little repetitive. I've said this. I first said it in May at the All In Summit, and I said it again on the show twice.
Great.
Which is, I think that the definition of a recession, of negative GDP growth when you're coming off of inflated GDP is, it's not a binary catch-all term. I mean, the fact is we had inflated assets, and as a result of inflated assets, we had inflated earnings, and we had inflated valuation, and we had inflated income, and now the capital's coming out, and things are going to go down inevitably. But I don't think that this should be deemed that there's something fundamentally negative about the U.S. economy. The biggest risk I still see is this rising consumer credit balance, particularly in a rising rate environment. People are taking on more debt. If you look at the New York Fed, here I'll just give you the latest. This is the household debt and credit report. They put out household debt rises to $16 trillion amid growth in housing and non-housing balances. And so there are variable rate loans in there in the auto, home, and credit card markets. Those variable rates mean that as interest rates climb, the amount to service existing debt will go up each month. And the amount of debt that's being taken on is also going up each month. And so the key economic question is, does the income gain that's being experienced or the asset value gain that's being experienced outpace the increase in monthly debt service needed for a large number of consumers? Student loans are also in here, by the way. And so when you put that all together, it's a very technical question, which is technically, where do you start to see defaults rise? And when you have defaults rise, then the money that's owed and the service payments that are owed on that debt trickles through the economy, because bonds start to default, equities start to decline, and so on. So, this is why I can speak at a high level from a macro point of view, that the rate at which debt is going up and consumer credit is going up, and the rate at which rates are climbing that affect the revolving and variable rate debt that consumers hold could outpace the income and the asset value gain, particularly when equities are down, 401ks are down, housing prices are down. And so there's a tipping point. And when that starts to happen, then you start to really hit an economic crunch. And I've mentioned this multiple times now, that it's the thing, I would kind of watch most closely. While there are core elements of the current economy that look strong, there are real concerns around whether consumers can keep up with their debt payments in the months and quarters ahead. Yeah.
Chamath, are you following this consumer credit surge? And do you think that this could be a black swan type event? This could be,
it's no black swan because it's right here in front of us. So,
Okay.
I think,
I would say like a massive contagion where there's massive number of defaults creating a black swan contagion-like event. But yes, so it's maybe hidden in plain sight. What do you think, Chamath? Is this important data or impacting your view on things?
Yeah, I think it's important. It's part of a mosaic, and I don't really know. Look, what are we trying to get from this discussion? I don't understand. Like, are we trying to predict what's going to happen? I mean, I think David basically said it best. Like, if you actually just take a step back and stop overlaying what we want to happen. Look, the reality is all four of us want things to go up. And we like it when there's money in the system and everything's flush. But if we had said last year that we would open an envelope and, we would show these inflation prints, we would be shocked and we would have been scared. And quite honestly, in the process in November, when I started selling, I would have sold even more violently than I sold. And all I can say is I saved my ass in November of last year, looking at what's happened in the last 6-8 months. So I don't know. I just think that if you look at the CPI print and you look at the components, we were saved because energy basically fell off a cliff. And for whatever reason, a bunch of people decided not to travel, and we didn't import as much oil, and we were able to keep costs contained, and that kept CPI from being really out of control. But again, we're in the summer where we don't have the pressure on energy that we're going to have in October, November this year. So I really don't know. I mean, I just think that there is, like, Freeberg has his pet issue. I have my pet issue. Sachs has his pet issue. You ask 100 economists, they'll have their own pet issue, housing affordability, whatever it is. The point is, we have 100 whack-a-mole problems. And the question is, which mousetrap sets off the rest of the mousetraps? I have no idea. And so, I just think that right now things are a little bit too calm. And that makes me feel very unsettled.
Another shoe might drop. I mean, the point of the conversation is to try to understand and make better decisions in capital allocation, company formation, and placing bets in the next year. So I think that's the point of the discussion.
We now have the spectacle of the president saying he's going to pass an Inflation Reduction Act to solve a 0% inflation problem to get us out of a recession that he says doesn't exist. You guys know this, but the politics and the political commentary on this are absurd. I think what we're describing here is just simply more honest, which is to say that the data is mixed and we don't exactly know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think is encouraging is when you look at this jobs data and you look at the debt that consumers are putting on, my theory is, and I could be wrong, that people want to keep spending. They want to keep living their lives. They're taking on a little bit of debt to deal with inflation and to keep spending, but they're also going back to work. And I'm seeing that anecdotally, a lot more people going back to work, and the numbers show that. That feels to me, and I said this on previous episodes, that feels like a possible, very helpful path out here. And I think you brought it up, Sachs, as well, which is, hey, if we have increased participation, that's great, increases monetary velocity, increases participation in the economy. That's a possible path out. Do you feel like that's still holding strong?
We've been in secular decline on that trend for 25 years. So maybe on the margins, a few folks run out of stimulus and decide to go and get a job. But I don't think, again, it's kind of like, when you're at the blackjack table in Vegas and
clapping as a strategy.
Clapping
as a strategy.
Is not a strategy. I feel like all what we're talking about right now is clapping as a strategy. Maybe this can happen. Maybe that can happen. You know what? Maybe it'll start raining gold fucking coins that we can use and just not have to worry about.
Jake,
I feel like the last 15 minutes have been not a good conversation.
I think it's totally repetitive.
It's a great conversation.
No, listen, I think it's totally repetitive. It's totally
repetitive.
Jake Al, because look, the structure of the problem, I think, is very well defined, which is we have an inflation problem. Great. It went down from 9.1 to 8.5%. It's still really high. 2 to 3% would be normal. Okay. So that's half the problem is how fast is inflation going to go back down to normal based on interest rate cuts? The other side of the problem is interest rate increases, not cuts. The other side of the problem is how much will the economy be hurt by these rising rates? And those are the two variables. And we see that there is a slowdown. There's still a lot of jobs being filled, which is good, but there is unquestionably an economic slowdown. And those are the two sides of this equation. And we just need to see some economic data. It's going to play out over the next several months.
You've been asking the same question for 3 fucking weeks.
If you guys don't want to talk about the new data, that's fine.
Hey, who cares? It's like we just
none of us care. None of us care.
None of us, we don't have an opinion other than we don't know. How many ways can we say we don't know?
I don't want to talk about inflation or recession or jobs or any of that shit anymore unless there's something really for us all to say, like something news come out, like some fucking economic report.
Was really important. I mean, that was a massive print. But
it's not that. It's
twice as many jobs.
It's on the track of what we've already
said. It's one
said.
data point. It's one data point.
And it's on the track.
And you know what? There were some bad jobs reports before that print.
Yeah. So, I think we should stop doing the recession inflation chat every week. It honestly is like repetitive.
Do a better job moderating. Can you not dial it in?
You guys asked to talk about it. You guys put some of these things on the docket.
I don't want to talk about it anymore. I think we should cut that shit.
Let's move on. Yeah. What do you want to move on to?
I think SoftBank was a great chat. I think, that was a good talk. We should do that kind of shit. We should talk about Trump.
I want to know what you guys think about the Sequoia Evergreen Fund. Tell me what you guys think about that. Come on, geniuses.
The Sequoia, like when they restructured? Are you joking?
No, I love when these two go silent.
No, I didn't want to interrupt anybody.
I don't understand what you're saying.